Michael, call the roll. Go ahead. You know
Will
the
do.
players.
Let me do this in appropriate order. Councilmember Asher?
Here.
You got it? Okay. I'll let the city clerk.
Sorry. Councilmember Asher.
Here.
Vice Mayor Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Donahue.
Here.
Mayor Atkin.
She's running late.
Mayor Atkins on the way.
Very shortly.
Councilmember Martinez.
Here.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we're going to jump right into public comments. Where are the comment cards?
Well, this would be public comments, not on this particular item, but on other items that are not on the agenda.
Public comments that are not on the agenda for tonight. Okay, then we'll move right along to the staff report. Mr. Biddle.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Davis, council members.
Some additional.
Before you tonight is consideration of a urgency interim ordinance establishing moratorium on approval or issuance of planning approvals for multi-unit residential uses. Purpose of the meeting, this meeting, is to consider that ordinance that I just referred to. The ordinance does provide exceptions for projects that have secured all required discretionary permits. Staff is also seeking further direction from the council as to the Marketplace project. An urgency interim ordinance must be passed by a 4/5 vote of the council, and the council must make findings of a current and immediate threat to public health, safety, or welfare, and that the approval of uses prohibited by the urgency ordinance results in that threat to public health, safety, or welfare. On February 3rd, 2015 at the council meeting, there was a discussion on one of the agenda items that evening, and the council expressed an interest in exploring the issue of unit mix in residential development, is interested in a higher percentage of 3+ bedroom units, issues of family-friendly design, affordability, ownership opportunities, and also wanted to look and review and reconsider the development bonus system that's in the city's planning regulations, which is distinct from state density bonus law, but the city's separate development bonus system, and look at those that system in relation to trying to achieve some of those desires I just spoke about. The council directed staff to prepare an urgency or interim ordinance pertaining to multi-unit residential use for consideration this evening. The purpose of the interim ordinance is not about NIMBYism. There's this flyer going around. And when you look at sort of historical data of the city related to its regional housing needs allocation and performance, I think the city has a pretty good story to tell in terms of producing total number of units, and in certain areas has also done quite well in trying to meet its percentage allocation of total below market rate units, very low, low, and moderate. But you'll see in that 2007 to 2014 period that the percentage met, as it were, of the city in relation to those goals has fallen in relation to years prior. And I think in many respects that is one of the impacts of the loss of redevelopment, as well as a decision in what's known as the Palmer case, which essentially restricted the city's ability in relation to its interim or its inclusionary housing ordinance to apply that to rental projects. But nevertheless, I think The city has historically provided in excess of its regional housing needs and has achieved some good numbers in terms of the below market rate units, but there's always a need for more, it seems. Going forward, currently, so the Ambassador Housing Project, that project just opened up in early 2014. 69 total units there, 68 are affordable, and there's sort of the unit breakdown. 64th and Christie, this is part of the market phase 1 of the Marketplace project. I believe it has just obtained its occupancy permit. Total of 190 units, 29 affordable, and then there's also the breakdown for unit mix. Park at Powell, on the corner of Powell and Hollis. 173 units, 21 are affordable. And there's the unit breakdown between studios, 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, live work. 3900 Adeline, that's currently under construction on Adeline Street. 101 units. That project is partially in Oakland. 12 of them are affordable. There's the unit breakdown. The Moz building has been approved. I believe it's in for plan check. 105 total units. None of them are affordable. And there's your breakdown in terms of unit mix. And 3706 San Pablo Avenue was recently just approved by the Planning Commission. Will be coming to the council in terms of approval of development, disposition development agreement with the developer, because that is a city-owned parcel. And that will comprise 87 units, 87 being affordable to very low and low income. So overall, of those projects, 725 units, 217 affordable. There's a studios, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom breakdown. With respect to the city's housing element, goals and policies, so in October 2009, the city adopted its general plan. November 2014, council adopted housing element. Housing element identifies 7 goals. 2 of them, housing goal H2, encourage development of housing affordable to extremely low, very low, and low income households. And housing goal H6, improve the balance in housing tenure and unit sizes to specifically address the need for family-friendly housing and increase owner occupancy. Housing goal 2, there it is there. It identifies 2 policies implemented by various programs to achieve each goal. Policy H21, ensure that the planning regulations continue to facilitate development of affordable housing. Policy H2-2, support new housing opportunities for affordable housing. Housing goal H6, again, looking at the balance in tenure and the need for family-friendly housing and desire to increase owner occupancy, identifies 3 policies. There's the policies H61, 62, and 63. Then with respect to housing policy H61, the housing element identifies program H6-1-1, wherein by 2015, and that's this year, the city is to adopt and implement an amendment to the city's design guidelines that provide standards for the development of family-friendly housing. The guidelines will address site design as well as unit design, including unit sizes and layouts, relationship of units to outdoor areas, and other unit and community features. With respect to the design guidelines, the Commission will be considering revisions to those guidelines later this month on February 26th. Draft guidelines have previously been considered by the Commission back in January 2011 and June 2013, and also they were considered by the Council in April of last year as part of the housing element discussion. And again, the guidelines provide standards for development of what has been termed as family-friendly housing related to site design, unit sizes, layouts, etc. With respect to the development bonus system, discussion, consideration, revisions to that system will be taken up at subsequent council commission meetings. There have been various letters that have been provided to, that were as part of your packet, and letters that have come in since, and we put, I believe, all of them on the dais, also emails. And a few of them make note that the city may not use zoning to dictate housing tenure, essentially dictating whether a project is rental or ownership, and we would agree with that position. We do believe that we may tailor our development bonus system, which is distinct, as I say, from the state bonus, density bonus law, to provide incentives for development of ownership housing, as well as incentives for development of affordable housing. So I think the question of the day is, what is family-friendly housing? Comment letters point out that the city may not restrict and thus discriminate based on familial status. Family includes, in the Fair Housing Act, a single individual. And there is also recital to the fact that prohibited conduct includes enactment of land use rules, ordinances, policies, etc., that restrict or deny housing opportunities or otherwise make unavailable dwellings to persons because of various categories, including familial status. But the city has never expressed an intent that I've ever heard of any desire to restrict or deny housing opportunities based on family or familial status. Family-friendly is about providing larger units with unit sizes with 3+ bedrooms to accommodate larger households which may have children. And the city's goal is to have residential development provide a larger percentage of units at sizes and bedroom count that accommodate larger households than has been provided historically. So why do we care about unit size and bedrooms? The city and the school district have had a long relationship in terms of trying to work together. The city and the school district last year executed an agreement spanning 60-odd years for the development and operation of the Emeryville Center of Community Life, a roughly $90 million project that is currently under construction. It's a project that council is very well aware of, and I believe members of the audience are as well, that involves the sharing of space amongst the city and the district for educational and community needs. The projected district enrollment is projected to increase from a current of 800 to really only 1,200, despite a projected population increase from a current amount of 10,500 to about 17,500. 2030 planning period of the general plan. Currently, current enrollment of the district is about 40% of the enrollment lives outside of Emeryville. So in support of the district's health in terms of enrollment, the council hopes to increase housing opportunities in Emeryville for larger households which may have children who would then hopefully attend the schools. And why do we care about size of bedrooms? Increase housing opportunities for households in need of larger unit size and bedroom count decreases the likelihood of crowding and overcrowding. And crowding and overcrowding has negative public health impacts on children and parent-child relationships. Why do we care about affordability? Emeryville has a long history of pursuing production of housing and affordable housing. An example of a segment of the city's community that's in need of affordable housing relates to the low-wage service workers that make up a large percentage of the workforce, obviously, in Emeryville. Commercial enterprises in Emeryville, retail, hotel, gambling, they make up about 36% of the city's land use and represent a large segment of the city's general fund. These uses have a large percentage of low-wage service workers, and the lack of affordable housing in Emeryville forces many of them to locate miles away, increasing traffic congestion environmental impacts and public health impacts to the individuals who are making those travel distances. At present, the city is processing 4 separate multi-unit development, residential development applications, proposing approximately 1,200 units combined. That represents roughly 80% of the city's regional housing needs allocation for 2012 through 2022. 3 of the applications, being the 2 Marketplace site and the Nady site, represent approximately 700 of those 1,200 units, or roughly 50% of our RENA allocation. And those projects, in terms of scheduling, are intended to be presented to the Planning Commission for consideration of approval prior to the adoption of revisions to the city's design guidelines and revisions to the development bonus system. I will note, you'll recall that earlier I indicated that the design guidelines have been sort of in various iterations over the last few years. I'm informed by staff that the design of these 3 projects have been influenced by the draft design guidelines. However, those guidelines do not provide any policy direction from the city as to the mix of unit sizes. So while it does address sort of design details of the individual units in a way that would make them, family friendly, for lack of a better term at this time, it does not address the issue of unit mix. Government Code Section 65-858 allows the city to adopt an urgency ordinance prohibiting uses that may be in conflict with a contemplated general plan, specific plan, or zoning proposal the city is considering or studying. So we are currently studying the design guidelines, and council wants us to look at the development bonus system, which is part of the city's zoning. Approval of the 4 multi-unit residential projects without the guidance from those studies would serve to frustrate the city's ability to advance its housing goals. And without the benefit of this additional study, approval of these projects results potentially in development of more rental housing units, a large percentage of which currently proposed is not conducive for large households, and none of it is proposed to be affordable or available at affordable rents. The proposed urgency ordinance is necessary to avoid conflict with the amendments the city is studying. And as indicated, urgency ordinance is necessary to provide the city the time to consider those revisions and to ensure that a number of housing units suitable for larger households are provided, and that the city's development bonus system is tailored to provide incentives for the provision of affordable housing and ownership housing. Again, we can't dictate the provision of ownership housing, and likewise, in terms of affordable housing, we've put forth our housing impact fee program, but we can't sort of dictate to applicants that they must provide that. And so what we're looking at, or would propose to look at, is a development bonus system that gets tailored in a fashion where the development bonuses are triggered by provision of those types of amenities. The proposed interim ordinance prohibits the approval or issuance of a permit, a discretionary permit that's required for any permittee to thereafter get a building permit to construct multi-unit residential uses. The interim ordinance does not prohibit processing of applications. I know there's been some requests that we stop processing applications. We are not legally allowed to do that, so it does not prohibit the processing of applications. And the interim ordinance does not prohibit the issuance of a building permit for any use which has secured its discretionary permits as of the date of the interim ordinance, and that would be the 3706 San Pablo Avenue project would fall in that category. At the outset, we also indicated we wanted to obtained some further direction from the council about the Marketplace project, plan unit development. The ordinance presented encompasses prohibiting any discretionary permits required by the planning regulations. Included in the scope are projects that require a preliminary development plan or a final development plan. A planned unit development zone is a tool to encourage development of large sites. And the PUD applications are a two-step process. An applicant first applies for and receives a preliminary development plan for the planned unit development. And the PDP, Preliminary Development Plan, God love these acronyms, constitutes the zoning for the site, so it dictates the uses, the height, the density, and it may stipulate the development of the PUD occur in phases. Thereafter, the project proponent applies for approvals of one or more subsequent final development plans. And in granting a final development plan, an FDP, the Planning Commission, or if it goes to the Council on Appeal, must find that each FDP substantially conforms to the previously approved PDP. With respect to the Marketplace project, the Council approved the PUD PDP for that project back in August 2008. On October 19th, 2010, the Council approved the FDP for Phase 1. That's the 190-unit residential building that I showed you earlier on the corner of 64th and Christie. 190 rental unit. The interim ordinance, as indicated, prohibits issuance of any PDP or FDP. Therefore, even though the Marketplace has obtained its PUD PDP, because the applicant must still obtain an FDP, the project would be subject to the ordinance. It's worth noting that the Marketplace PUD establishes the density for the project, and so it's not dependent on the city's development bonus system in any fashion to get bonus points, as it were, for density. So any changes to that system would really have no bearing on the Marketplace project. So staff is seeking direction from the council on whether projects which have already obtained a PUD, PDP, such as the Marketplace project, and that's the only one that that I'm aware of that comes to mind that this would be applicable to, but must still obtain one or more FDPs, should be subject to the ordinance. With respect to urgency ordinances, may only be, most ordinances I should say, may only be adopted by a majority vote at a regular meeting after 2 readings. An ordinance normally takes 30 days, takes effect 30 days after its passage. A city may adopt an urgency ordinance for the immediate preservation, public health, safety, or welfare, and the ordinance must contain a declaration of facts constituting the urgency and be approved by a 4/5 vote. The urgency ordinance does not require 2 readings, but instead may be passed immediately upon introduction at either a special or a regular meeting. And tonight we are having a special meeting. An urgency interim ordinance may be extended twice, initially for an additional 10 months and 15 days, and subsequently for a year. Any extension requires a 4/5 vote for adoption, and no more than 2 extensions may be adopted. So for a total of up to 2 years, and moratorium can be left in place. With respect to required findings, again, the Government Code provides the council shall not adopt or extend any interim ordinance unless the ordinance contains findings that there is a current and immediate threat to the public health, safety, or welfare, and that the approval of additional land use entitlements would result in that threat to the public health, safety, or welfare. In addition, an interim ordinance that denies approvals for projects with a significant component of multifamily housing may not be extended after it's initially adopted, may not be extended except upon written findings adopted by the council, supported by substantial evidence on the record that the following conditions exist. And before I go on, a significant component of multifamily housing essentially would encompass all the projects that that are being proposed currently. That term encompasses them. So the continual approval, so to extend the interim ordinance, the continued approval of the development of multifamily housing projects would have a specific adverse impact upon the public health or safety. So impacts to public welfare are immaterial when you seek to extend an interim ordinance. A specific adverse impact means a significant, quantifiable, direct, and unavoidable impact based on objective, identified written public health or safety standards, policies, or conditions as they existed on the date that the ordinance is adopted by the legislative body. Secondly, the interim ordinance is necessary to mitigate or avoid the specific adverse impact identified. And third, there is no feasible alternative to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid the specific adverse impact identified as well or better with a less burdensome or restrictive effect than the adoption of the proposed interim ordinance. So that's to keep in mind what would come up if the council were to adopt an ordinance tonight and then it went to extend it. These are the rules that would be in place. So 10 days prior to the expiration of the interim ordinance or any extension, the council shall issue a written report describing the measures taken to alleviate the condition which led to the adoption of the ordinance. And again, as I said, projects with a significant component of multifamily housing means projects in which multifamily housing consists at least 1/3 of the total square footage of the project. So, as I said, that definition encompasses the 4 projects referred to earlier. The findings of adoption of the interim ordinance, this is right out of the ordinance itself. I am not going to read them, but they are in the ordinance that was drafted. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the last, the above finding established a current and immediate threat to the public health, safety, and welfare, and approval of additional land use entitlements required for compliance with the city's planning regulations would result in a threat to public health, safety, and welfare. Again, this is just reminding you about the findings that would be required in the event that the council adopts the interim ordinance and then came back to extend it. So with respect to an interim ordinance addressing uses with a significant component of multifamily housing, while the initial 45-day interim ordinance may be adopted based on findings of a current and immediate threat to public health, safety, or welfare, again, the interim ordinance may only be extended based on threats to public health or safety. Further, as I indicated, there's a need to make a finding that the ordinance is necessary to mitigate that impact and that there is no other feasible alternative to mitigate other than the ordinance itself. These are very high evidentiary standards which the city will bear the burden of proof. So staff has received correspondence and email from interested parties which have been provided in the agenda packet. Other correspondence has been received since the posting of the agenda and are on your dais. And we've also posted, I believe, the majority of them to the website. So in order to adopt the interim ordinance, the council must make the finding that there is a current immediate threat to public health, safety, or welfare. The approval of the additional planning entitlements will result in a threat to the public health, safety, or welfare as described in this report and contained in the ordinance. The interim ordinance would be valid for 45 days from adoption, after which it will expire unless as extended as we discussed above. So at this time, the council is asked to provide direction on the following issues. Obviously, after you hear from interested parties here, but some of the issues that we would be looking for from direction, whether projects which have already obtained a PUD, PDP should be included. If there's any other type of planning approval the council wants to exclude from the scope of the ordinance, whether there's additional findings or different findings in support of the interim ordinance the council would like to suggest, And then if the interim ordinance is adopted, it would expire March 30th, which is a Monday. And so it would be good to get an idea as to when you would like to hold a hearing to consider its extension. That obviously doesn't have to be decided tonight. You could give further direction on that later, but that's something we would need to have some sense about it at some point. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Well, first of all, my apologies for being stuck in Friday afternoon traffic leaving work. Highway 24 had an uncharacteristic backup, especially since the fourth bore has been opened. I haven't experienced that. We will next hear from the public. I've received speaker cards. If you wish to speak and you have not submitted a speaker card, please do so. The city clerk will pass that up to me. So we have 3 minutes at the max for for public comment. We will be timing. I will call you up and in threes, and please line up after so we can not have any delays. First up is Lisa Findley, Sig Anderson, and Brian Carver.
Hi, I'm Lisa Findlay, Emeryville resident, and I live over on Christie Avenue, not in PPP. And I would like to say, I think, you know, clearly all of the goals that the City Council is after, family-friendly housing, affordable housing, housing ownership, is all great. It's really desirable. I'm not sure this is the right tool for that. I'm particularly concerned as a member of the community that's been very actively vocal in the development around the marketplace, that the developers have done an amazing job in responding to that, and I'm very concerned that this doesn't stop us. And I'm wondering if there are other ways that the city can work with you developers in the next 45 days. Beyond that, I think it's very difficult to imagine how urgency will be developed. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Sig Anderson.
Mayor Atkins, Vice Mayor Davis, council members. My name is Sig Anderson. I'm a partner with City Center Realty Partners, the owner of the public market. In 2008, the city approved a PDP, as Mr. Biddle previously said, for the development of the public market. Subsequent to the approval of the PDP, the public market undertook fairly significant renovations to portions of the building and became the first platinum status project, which is the highest rating they have, under the U.S. Green Building Council's Lead for Neighborhood Development pilot program. For the past 18 months, we have been diligently working through the process of getting FDP approvals for a number of things: a grocery store, expansion of Christie Park, realignment of Shellmount Street, and through this process have had numerous meetings with city staff, local community stakeholders, as well as public sessions with the Planning Commission. We currently have an agreement to sell 2 parcels to Avalon Bay for development of residential units. With respect to our pending FDPs, we are not, as Mr. Biddle also pointed out, utilizing the city's density bonus program, so they do not apply to public market in any way. As it relates to unit mix and family-friendly housing, these issues have been and are still being discussed at length with city staff as part of the normal planning process. We are currently scheduled to present for our final FDP approval of the Christie Park renovation and expansion February 26th of this year, in a few weeks. We are also then scheduled to present our final FDP approval for both the Shellmount Street realignment and our Parcel C plan, which includes the development of the grocery store. Our deal with the grocery store includes fairly specific timing with respect to delivery of the store, and any delays which result from this moratorium would put that deal at risk. We've invested a significant amount of time and money to implement the vision of the FDP into the design and expansion and renovation of Christie Park and design and relocation of Shellmount Street. With the public market FDPs currently in process from both City Center Realty and Avalon Bay, the city will receive approximately $15.6 million in fees. Of this amount, $11.2 million is for the city affordable housing fees, $1.6 million is for city school fees, and $1.4 million is for parks and transit. We are on the verge of delivering a new park, a grocery store, realignment of Shell Mound, and much-needed residential to the city of Emeryville. A moratorium has the potential to put all of this in jeopardy. Thank you for your consideration.
Brian?
Good evening, Mayor Atkin, members of the City Council. My name is Brian Carver. I'm an Emeryville resident and homeowner. I'm afraid you're going to hear tonight from a bunch of people that do not live in Emeryville, do not understand our situation, and do not understand what should be done. And that's for you to vote in favor of this moratorium. Some speakers tonight will probably tell you that if you do this, then the sky will fall, something terrible will happen. Don't believe it. Tonight, you're only considering pressing the pause button. You're considering something that will last just 45 days. Nothing tragic is going to happen in 45 days. But if you agree to this moratorium, something very good can happen in that time frame, or maybe a little more. The city staff and council can take a hard look at our housing situation and try to craft something that will enable us to actually achieve what our general plan and our election time brochures say that we want in Emeryville. That's right. I'm certain I've received from each and every one of you that an election brochure that stated that you supported both family-friendly and affordable housing in Emeryville. You and I both know that voters want this. That's one reason why you advertise your support of these things on election mailers. And there's little doubt that this is what our general plan states that we are aiming for. The problem seems to be that our policies are not finely tuned enough for us to actually get the family-friendly and affordable housing that we want. This moratorium gives you the breathing room to put those policies in place so that our general plan can move towards being a work of nonfiction rather than fantasy. What's in our new housing element? It's a recognition of some really serious problems. We've got a lot of multi-housing units in Emeryville, and our housing element states that most units, 82%, are studios or one-bedroom units. It says, quote, there are limited opportunities for housing appropriate for families or larger households. It says, quote, rents are unaffordable to lower income households and are climbing. Quote, the community continues to emphasize and prioritize the need to house families with children, artists, and civic employees. If you're not willing to take this step to address the housing crisis we have in Emeryville, then I think you should feel an obligation to explain to the public the alternative you do favor, because the status quo is simply not getting us the right results. It's time to do something, so I urge you to support this moratorium.
Thank you. The next three are Rick Tejada Flores, Rod Henme, I hope I got that name right, and Paul Campos.
Good evening, Mayor Atkin and City Council. My name is Rick Tejada Flores. I'm an 18-year resident and homeowner in Emeryville. I live across from what used to be a middle school. It's been vacant for a number of years because we don't have any children. And I would suggest to you, regardless of the audience of the ordinance, that a city that doesn't have another generation is a dying city. It cannot sustain itself. We cannot have a city built of one-bedroom apartments. The other thing is, the general point I'd like to make is that if you think for a minute, if you're going on vacation, where would you like to go? And I'm not talking about the beach. I'm talking about what city would you like to go. Any city you're going to choose has treasured and defended the quality of its life. Paris has a lot of problems, but it also limits downtown growth to 6 stories. Cities that protect those qualities survive and flourish. And I'm not saying you have to be rigid about it, but we have to have policies that can change with the times. You know, this is not the same world as when I moved here 18 years ago. But unless we implement those values in terms of deciding what we care about in our city and preserving it, it's going to be gone. Of the projects here, I think the marketplace is probably the best suited for what we're talking about right now. It's as the gentleman said, it's in discussion. It can always get better. The other projects are much more problematic. 600 units of studios is not going to create a new fee. Well, if you look at what happened around the stadium in San Francisco, you have a new community of studios and one-bedrooms, and it's created a new community, but it's a different community. It has nothing to do with the community that was there, and that's fine. But I would like to preserve what we have here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Rod?
Good evening. My name is Rod Hedme. I'm an Emeryville homeowner. and also an architect for more than 2,000 affordable housing units. And I speak from that standpoint because I obviously share your concern for family-friendly housing, but believe this moratorium could be counterproductive, and I'm against the ordinance for these reasons. Number one, this staff member reported that 30% affordable housing was added as a result of the recent projects that were constructed. 2 were fully affordable buildings using TCAC. But all except for one were actually, the others were market rate buildings that provided a significant portion of affordable housing units as a result of their construction. I think the best way to provide affordable family units is through the Affordable Family Program, not by legislating the inclusion of 3-bedroom units into a market rate project. In fact, almost all the market rate projects that I have seen have used a unit mix that is similar to the one proposed for the marketplace unit. That is 1s, 2s, and studios, with very few 3s. I would suggest that starting to legislate the number of 3s would very much limit the market rate development that would occur and would very much endanger the marketplace development. I also know that changing the rules after the fact, which this would be for the marketplace development, is really a poor policy. I think in general it's not fair. And number 2 is I think it hurts the city's reputation in terms of developers that might come into this. Yes, 45 days is short, but there's no guarantee to this developer that this ordinance is going to be held to 45 days. It could easily, unless, for example, you are willing to guarantee there will be no extension. In that case, that's a huge unknown for that developer, and I can very much see why that project could potentially be killed or at least delayed for a long time. I'm in favor of the way the development has improved. I think it would be good for the city. I think the inclusion in the affordable housing dollars that would result from that would be very good for the affordable housing and the family-friendly policy. So I would suggest, or I would recommend that you not approve this exemption or this ordinance, and instead I would vote for better policies that would be family-friendly. Thank you.
Paul?
Good evening. Paul Campos with the Building Industry Association of the Bay Area. I'd like to just make 2 comments, if I might. First is that every one of the legitimate interests that the city has raised tonight can and should be addressed through legitimate planning means other than a moratorium. A moratorium is a nuclear option that is supposed to be reserved for the most drastic circumstances. Every one of the developer applicants has reached out their hand to you in good faith and said they're willing to work with you to address all of your concerns. I really hope that you take up that offer and work with them rather than take this step. Second, I want to follow up on a point, the discussion that the city attorney had on Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. That's the Fair Housing Act. A couple of important points that were omitted. First is that on February 15th, 2013, HUD amended the federal regulations implementing the Fair Housing Act to provide that a practice that has a discriminatory effect where it actually or predictably results in a disparate impact on a group of persons or creates, increases, reinforces, or perpetuates segregated housing patterns because of familial status is unlawful. These changes confirm that an ordinance is one type of land use decision that is covered by the Act under a theory of intentional discrimination or, and this is important, or discriminatory effect, and that land use decisions may discriminate from the moment of enactment. So I really think that you ought to step back from this drastic action and not risk going across the line, enacting ordinance that really, all this talk about family status, as the city attorney says, is right in the wheelhouse of the Fair Housing Act. So you can't discriminate by adopting a moratorium that's going to have a disparate impact on single people, non-traditional families without children. Everyone needs housing and deserves a fair shot at housing, including in Emeryville. If you want to try to entice children to come to Emeryville, there are legitimate ways to do it. This isn't it. Please work with the development community to make your goals happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next 3 are Kevin Brown, Andrew Baker, and Tamsin Plume.
Evening, Council. My name is Kevin Brown with Holiday Development. We, over the past 10 years, have done about 163 units in Emeryville, all for sale, many large units, and we've also implemented a voluntary affordable housing program on one of those projects. So I think many of the projects we've done have tried to hit the goals that you seek. And while we don't have a project directly affected by this ordinance, we are very concerned by the policy taking place in the city. The projects that we've done that have been successful have really been in great partnership with you. It's been a unique experience for us, and I think the outcome has been a win-win for everybody. And this doesn't feel like a partnership. It feels like it could send a shockwave through the community that really has a lasting effect far greater than 45 days. I respect your goals and hope that they can be achieved, but I think that this might actually be a detriment towards hitting those goals in the long term. 7 years ago, when we were selling one of our townhome projects, Blue Star Corner, there was a lot of excitement about future connections to Bay Street, parks, development at Sherwin-Williams. And it kept feeling like it was sort of right around the corner, right around the corner. I was over there a couple weeks ago, and up against the fence was a camper with somebody, getting out, and he and his dog both were leaving themselves onto the property. I hope that rather than let that kind of activity continue, there's an opportunity here to really collaborate with the applicants in front of you and get a successful outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew Baker?
Hello, Mayor Atkin, council members, staff, and Mr. Biddle. Thank you for having me. Andrew Baker, Anton Development. And we are the applicant for the development at 6701 Shell Mound, also known as the Nady site. And we're here tonight to discuss these housing issues, which truly we're not upset about. This kind of dialogue is important. Getting housing built and getting it right is important. It's just the forum, I think, might not be the right one, and I worry that this housing moratorium might have unintended consequences that we should think through a little more clearly. Initially, globally, I worry that a housing moratorium could be counterproductive to the ultimate goal of getting housing in the community and perhaps is unwise. We're in an acute housing crisis in the city of Emeryville, as we are in the Bay Area, and we're the fortunate beneficiaries of an economic engine that is firing on all cylinders, where we've got job growth outperforming housing growth at a ratio of 10 to 1, and that's just unsustainable. So new housing needs to get built. It just has to be built the right way, and we respect that dialogue. And I would comment on the balance between a community's needs, a developer's actions, and the city's goals is a delicate balance and an equilibrium between supply, demand, rents, all these outside issues that come together, and the moment in time to get it right can be fleeting, as we saw with the Great Recession. And I'm just fearful that there's could be unintended consequences that are counterproductive towards getting more housing in the community. Secondly, specifically, our project, the Nady site, has been discussed with staff and the various commissions since 2013. We've had productive dialogue, collaborative dialogue. We've listened, we've reacted and responded, and we have 50% of our units are 2 and 3 bedroom. They're over 1,000 square foot in average in general. Many of the units are over 1,200 square feet. And as we've been part of this collaborative process, we feel like we've listened and responded, and it feels unfair for this to come up at this late in the game when we are going to scheduled to go to Planning Commission next month. So in closing, I don't know the legal ramifications. I'm not going to be the one to comment on that, whether it's illegal or not.
That's your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
You.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Tamsin Plume.
Good evening, Mayor Atkins, Vice Mayor Davis, and council members. My name is Tamsin Plume. I'm a partner with the law firm of Holland & Knight. I've practiced land use and environmental law for 16 years. 10 of those years, I've been the land use counsel for the public market. You also know it as the Marketplace Redevelopment Project. I've been here many times. I was part of a very long process that led to the approval of the PDP in 2008. And I have to say that standing here tonight discussing a residential moratorium that could affect public market is surreal. I do remember sitting in the front row, actually right there, negotiating with Mayor Atkins some very critical conditions of approval for the PDP that actually required a minimum of residential in the Shellmound site if that were to be developed as office, and also required 50% of Marketplace to be developed as residential as the project was intended to be phased in over time. When the economic downturn occurred in 2008, I, among many others, really thought this project might never be built at all, which was really sad after all that work. And then it was followed straight on the heels with the shocking loss of redevelopment dollars, which were always intended to support the redevelopment of public market. You have our letter that has the detailed legal analysis. It's kind of weighty, and I know you've gotten a bunch of others as well. So I won't repeat myself. I just want to focus on a couple of key points now that we had a chance to review the staff report, the draft ordinance, and hear Mr. Biddle's presentation tonight. We do really appreciate that the staff report makes it clear that it won't affect ongoing applications. That is very important to Marketplace. The staff report also clarified the city's goals really relate to the city's density program and also unit mix. And on those points, as Mr. Biddle said as well, the density program has nothing to do with public market, and on family-friendly mix, the team has been working very well with city staff and for a long time, and they will continue to do so. So for public market in particular, the moratorium just doesn't have any, there's just no need for it. Our client has, as Sig said, invested millions of dollars in time and money to implement the vision of the PDP. And it would be unfortunate to enter some sort of legal battle that can be absolutely avoided. So for all the reasons we said in our letter, we hope you say no to the moratorium entirely, but at minimum, please exclude the public market. Thank you for your consideration.
The next speakers will be Nathan Hong, Miles Imwali, sorry, and Deborah W. Okay, sorry.
Good evening, Mayor Atkin, Vice Mayor Davis, and council members. My name is Nathan Hong. I'm the Senior Vice President with Avalon Bay, and we are City Center's partner at the public market and working on 2 parcels with approximately the 200 units each. We have been working together with the city and City Center for over a year. We became involved and the vision was pretty much set with the PDP. And we have been working to carry out that vision. So we have filed applications and presented our plans at several Planning Commission study sessions. We feel the planning process is working well. We understand the desire for more 3-bedrooms and family-friendly units, and we do both respect that and have a desire to include the family-friendly elements into our projects as well. Avalon Bay, we own and operate over 12,000 units in the Bay Area. And just to highlight some of the data that we collect, for most of our apartments, the percentage of occupied units with children range from around 10% to 50%, and mostly with 1 or 2 children, and all living in primarily 2 or 3 bedroom units. I wanted to just provide that statistic for you so that you know that we do design and operate apartments with families in mind. Towards that end, from our initial sessions and meetings with staff, it was highlighted to us the significance of family-friendly design, and even though we routinely include elements of that in our design, we also have worked really hard with staff and the city's design consultant to go further. And family-friendly, we talk about that a lot. So what is it? For us, we have increased the number of 3 bedrooms in for the larger families. We've also included townhomes with floor plans that has stoops and porches that are great for families. Within the units, we've included larger closets, more storage space. We have stackable washers and dryers. We also have side-by-sides with laundry closets. We have a variety of kitchens with islands that are great for families, separate dining, living rooms. And we're not just doing this for the 3 bedrooms. We do this for our 2 bedrooms as well, and that provides a diversity of unit mix and options for different families. And it doesn't stop there, because we also look at our amenities. So in our amenities, we have landscape courtyards, play zones. We're going to have a children's playroom. We'll have a swimming pool, barbecue areas. We may even have a movie screen somewhere, bike storage, dog wash. So all of those elements that kind of come together for the holistic approach of what we define and what we kind of experience in some of our other apartment communities. Since our application was submitted the middle of last year, together working with staff and the city's design architect, we feel the designs are evolving into a really high-quality, family-friendly building. We did receive positive comments at our January 22nd study session last month, and they felt it was moving in the right direction, and we are working to improve it further. Overall, we are following the guidelines of the approved PDP. This is not...
Thank you. That's your time. Miles?
Good evening, Mayor Atkins, Vice Mayor Davis, members of the City Council. My name is Miles Imwali. I'm a land use partner with the law firm of Morrison & Forrester. I've been working with Avalon Bay on the public market project for approximately the last year. You have a letter that I submitted earlier today. I won't go into all the details of it. I do want to just highlight a couple. Yes, good. A couple points I made that are a little bit different than some other speakers have been making. I think Mr. Biddle did a great job explaining the findings that you need to make both tonight and if you wish to extend it in 45 days. But to repeat, you need to find there's a current and immediate threat to health, safety, or welfare, and that approval of projects such as public market will cause those impacts. You need to have that connection. In our view, the draft ordinance does not support these findings. We've heard that there's lots of issues that are on the table that you want to take a pause to study. In my reading of the ordinance, in terms of the health and safety and welfare impacts, it boils down to two issues. One is that approval of projects will cause overcrowding, as well as approval of projects will essentially increase commute times for people that are unable to afford the rents in Emeryville. These findings provide the basis for your approval of the moratorium. However, the findings aren't supported by the evidence. As for overcrowding, currently 2% of Emeryville's units are overcrowded. That's 1/3 of the rate of the region. Overcrowding is not currently a problem. There's also no evidence that approving more units will worsen that issue. And to the contrary, Avalon Bay has data. They keep track of their projects. And we've looked at their recent projects. This is simply not an issue. As for longer commutes, this is really an affordable housing issue. I would submit that just less than 7 months ago, this council voted to adopt a new affordable housing program. If that is the concern, we should let that new program play itself out. If you want to adopt a moratorium based on that, it's essentially saying that the new program is not working, but we don't have the data for that. And lastly, I would say that even if these findings are supported by the evidence, they do not support the findings you'll need to make in 45 days. That will be a very high burden. I don't think you will not be able to make it, and I would urge you not to go down this path in the first place. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Sorry, I messed up your name.
Oh, it's not a problem. I just have bad handwriting. First of all, thank you so much, Mayor Atkin, Vice Mayor Davis, and council members for giving me the chance to speak to you tonight. So I'm a Bay Area native. I was born here in Santa Clara. I'm actually a homeowner right on the border of Emeryville and Oakland, and I work in Oakland. And you know, I've worked in a lot of different cities in the world, but I came back here, right? And what I found when I was working in different cities was what made those cities great were the immigrant population who came here, and they came here for the opportunity to chase their dreams, right? So there were 230,000 jobs created here in the Bay Area in the last 2 years. You know, these aren't just tech jobs, right? These are marketing jobs, sales jobs, restaurateurs, you know, artists. They're all coming here to the Bay Area. To put things in perspective, when I was a college student at Cal, I split a 2-bedroom right on Dwight for about less than $400 a person, and today, a 2-bedroom in Uptown Oakland costs $4,500. Yes, $4,500. I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure that starting salaries have not increased by 3 times in the last few years. And the real problem is that in the last 10 years, Oakland has had 15,000 residents added and only 3,000 units of housing, right? According to Plan Bay Area, we're looking at adding 2.2 million people to the Bay Area and up until 2040. You know, at the end of the day, I don't think a housing moratorium is really going to solve the housing crisis right now. I completely understand that we don't have enough 3 beds, and I would fully support any action to, say, increase the density per acre of dwelling units per acre and up the number of 3 beds. That seems to make complete sense. But we also need to be realistic about the changing demographics in the Bay, right? You have a lot of people moving here and they're in their 20s. They're not necessarily forming households right away. Instead, they're like having dogs, right? You have an aging boomer population. The senior population here is going to increase by 137% over the next 25 years, right? And people, they don't want to get, you know, for example, my parents, I don't know about your parents or maybe some of the people here, they don't want to go out to senior tract housing out in the suburbs, right? They want to stay here, be close to their families. So Emeryville is actually, I think, doing a really smart thing, right? Building a lot of studios in 1s and 2s, catering to this demographic and this population. So, you know, I fully understand the concerns about family friendliness, but I question whether or not a moratorium is the right way to do this and whether or not it makes sense to maybe work with staff to relook at the zoning code in addition to continuing building the units that Emeryville is building right now. Thank you.
Thanks. Deborah, could you say your name for the record?
Oh,
since I didn't.
It's Deborah Tu.
Thanks. Oh, that was way up. Okay, thank you. All right, our next speakers are Sonia Traus, I hope I got that right, Joshua Smee, Avi Flamhock, Flamholtz.
No. Hi. I live in West Oakland, and I'm here because what you decide tonight will affect us. I understand some of what motivates this moratorium is a concern with affordability. So if you're concerned with affordable housing and social justice, please do not create or encourage shortage conditions. Shortages are bad, and we already have a bad housing shortage. West Oakland is still pretty affordable, and it's very close to Emeryville. I mean, I'm closer to Emeryville than I am to East Oakland, definitely. But if this moratorium threatens 1,200 market rate units, where are those people going to go? I can't compete with them in West Oakland. If you don't build here, then we have to compete with them in West Oakland. Rents are already going up in West Oakland, and it's not because people are building there. People aren't building there very much. Rents are going up there because we have an overall shortage of all kinds of housing at every single price point. When you know, sort of expensive market rate housing fills up, then the people, and it has really, then the people who would like to spend $2,000 a month or more on something new start to look around at the currently cheaper, you know, existing, older, maybe in a less fashionable neighborhood, housing that lower income renters rely on. So yeah, so if you guys, yeah, please don't do this to us. If you want to protect renters, then you should pass rent control laws. This moratorium is not going to protect any renter. So passing strong rent control laws, that's really great. That's a really important part of preventing displacement. And at the same time, you have to make sure that you build fast enough to accommodate all the new people coming in. You want developers to look at something that's, you know, inhabited and be like, hey, should I kick these people out and renovate it? No, what a headache. That's horrible. Why would I do that when I can get all my permits and build as much as the market will finance, you know, get all my permits done in 6 weeks? That's how you protect renters. That's how you protect low-income housing, is you make sure that there's plenty of new housing for new people coming in. Thank you. Yeah, please don't cause displacement in West
Hello, my name is Joshua Smee. I'm currently a renter at the Bay Street apartment complex. I came here sort of last minute as I found out about the moratorium. This directly impacts me as a renter since you're cutting down on new supply of apartments, which is only going to cause my rent to go up. I know a lot of people are a lot of really admirable things they want to do, like more family-friendly housing, more affordable housing units, and I'm, in full favor of that. I think there's lots of opportunities going forward. I think stopping housing now is only going to set a bad precedent, not only in Emeryville, but also around the Bay Area. We currently have a shortage in every community, San Francisco, Oakland, Palo Alto, everywhere. Emeryville should be really at the forefront of kind of building apartments for everyone, single people like myself, as well as with families. So I'm just trying to encourage you to kind of consider the impact of the moratorium will have on everyone, including renters. And that's all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Avi Flamholtz.
Yeah. Hi, Mayor Atkin, council members. I come to you as a graduate student at Berkeley. I don't live in Emeryville, I live in North Oakland, but as a renter, I'm here to tell you that these are the same rental market, I promise. Many of my friends in graduate school live in Emeryville, and since I moved here about 2 years ago, I've been biking around Emeryville and noticing visibly how the city has changed and how much of that is due to new development, and also noticing at the same time how many of my peers are moving here. I very well could have, in my last move, which was a few weeks ago, moved to Emeryville, but I happened to find something in North Oakland. In addition, in my most recent move, my rent went up 20%. Right? I find it difficult to believe that that's because we're building too much in the area. So I fully support building of affordable housing. Graduate students, like my peers, don't earn that much, and we would love to pay less money for things. I fully support building of family housing. We will live next to families. We will tutor at your schools. We will do it. We do it already. So I just encourage you strongly not to be like the rest of the Bay and have a general attitude of no towards development, which I can tell you for sure affects our lives very strongly. And instead continue to work through the issues that you want to work through in terms of affordable housing and in terms of in terms of family-oriented housing, but to do it while continuing to build the things that are already in the pipeline. In addition, I recently had a awkward experience running recruitment for my department at Berkeley, and having to go through a little Craigslist search with a recruit and discover that actually it would be cheaper for them to go to Harvard. It would in fact be cheaper for them to live in Cambridge, Massachusetts than to live in the Bay Area. And I think that that's a revealing thing. And I just hope you think about that for a moment. Thank you very much, and thank you for having this occasion.
Thank you. Luis Mejia, Seth Brookshire, and Ken Bukowski.
Thank you, Mayor Atkin, Vice Mayor, and council members. I urge you to vote no on this moratorium. I live in a small neighborhood across the bay called San Francisco. The decisions and actions in my neighborhood affect everyone in Emeryville, and the decisions and actions in Emeryville affect me. By creating policies that change the rules of the game in the middle of the game, we are reducing supply, and in order to get the housing crisis under control, we need to increase supply as fast as possible. Please vote no on this moratorium. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a speaker who knows how to get to the point. Seth Brookshire.
Hello, Mayor, Council. Thank you very much for having us all this evening. My name is Seth Brookshire. I'm a resident of the Bay Area. I say that because I think we're all in the same crisis, and each community is addressing it differently, but I think we all need to think about it universally. Two things, very quick. First, unless we're able to universally redefine what the danger to public health and the adverse impact to safety and welfare is, I can't imagine how people living in apartments present that threat. I think that we actually need a mix of single-family dwellings as well as apartments of each size. And secondly, in terms of one of the speaker's comments about communities that fight to be the wonderful places that we all want to go and live. Paris is a terrific example. In fact, there was a war fought, And after the revolution and the beginning of the Republic and one of the first terrific democracies, Paris was demolished and rebuilt with significant added density, including small apartment units and realignment of thoroughfares and circulation. So I think what these projects are presenting actually kind of fits the mold of creating those wonderful places that we want to fight for. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken.
Hello, Ken Bukowski, 30-year resident. The real problem we have is all the rental housing. We have a small community here. I'm sure most of the people in the audience live in larger communities. We want people to participate. I've been involved in every election in the last 30 years. And you go to get participation in all the rental projects, no one wants to participate. We don't have that kind of community involvement. We have a crisis here because if we allow all this rental housing to continue, we won't have a stable community. Every time you turn around, somebody who's participating, they're gone, they're forced out. I mean, we're trying to get a stable community here, and I think that's a real important element of it. I don't know that the moratorium is going to accomplish that, but that's something that we really need to do. Thank you.
Our last speakers tonight are Eric Eston, I hope, and Tricia Malone. Eric, come on up.
Hey, City Council. My name is Eric Estrin. I am a renter in Berkeley. I've lived in Berkeley for about 6 years now, and I just kind of wanted to, because you've heard from people who live in Emeryville, you've heard from people who don't live in Emeryville, and I just wanted to kind of say something about my situation. As I mentioned, I live in Berkeley. And although I live in Berkeley, I also have spent a significant amount of time in Emeryville. I've enjoyed Arizmendi's Pizza many times here. I think it's a great institution. Also, you guys have great milkshakes at Rudy's Canfowl Cafe. But I also wanted to mention that I have spent time here. I have a PhD in biochemistry. I spent some time here at Anna Yates Elementary School, basically describing germs to the students. I volunteered doing that. I've also spent a significant amount of time in the Emeryville Triangle at the Emeryville Senior Center, or what used to be the Veterans Hall, as it says on the plaque outside. And I've spent significant time there. So I just kind of wanted to say that, despite the fact that I don't live here, I still have a significant, or I feel like I kind of know the community, and I've also kind of, as the last person stated, I have kind of contributed to that community. So I guess with that being said, kind of as a standing for both me and also people who don't live here, but who live right around here, I just wanted to say that you have to consider the fact that we are living in a very large community. Although Emeryville is just a small part of it, you have to consider all of the people here. And I think, as people have mentioned, we do have a supply problem because we have so much demand. So I would just urge you guys to really consider the people who may not be living here are still adding to the community. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Tricia Malone.
Good evening. I'm Tricia Malone with Anton Development Company. We've been working on the project, the Nady site on Shell Mound, for a while now, and are up for our Planning Commission hearing next month. In closing here tonight, I just wanted to point out that I believe it's unfair to punish developers who have been through this process for a long period of time and who are very close to receiving their approval after countless hours and listening to the city and taking their feedback and adjusting their project over and over again to get it just right and satisfy as many people as we possibly can. I strongly urge you to not impose this moratorium. If you do it, we ask that you exempt our project. Thank you.
Anna Shimko, John Bowders, and Alex Waterbury. I guess when I said that we were going to be the last speakers, I got
Not so
this
much,
rush
no.
of speaker cards.
Sorry, I didn't want to run across the room while people were speaking.
Good evening. My name is Anna Shimko. I have been a land use and development lawyer for the past 25 years, often in the city of Emeryville. We've submitted a letter to the city attorney, and I won't reiterate all of that, but the numerous letters from others as well as from us spell out the myriad reasons that we believe the proposed moratorium is not legally supportable. So I'll briefly highlight some of those reasons. First, the notion of halting housing in Emeryville would appear to conflict with the city's recently adopted housing element just approved by HCD. As you know, every city is required to plan for its fair share of regional housing needs, and the moratorium would be inconsistent with policies of the housing element aimed at providing housing to Emeryville to those at all income levels. I neglected to say, I'm sorry, that I'm here on behalf of the joint venture that is proposing to develop the Sherwin-Williams site. And the housing element does expect that at least 460 units will be developed on that site. A moratorium on housing would put the city at risk of being out of compliance with the housing element and of being ineligible for funding for certain programs that require compliance, such as parks funding. So I would advise you to communicate with HCD if you are considering a moratorium. Nothing in the staff report or other evidence demonstrates that there exists a current and immediate threat to the public health, safety, or welfare that would result from the approval within the next 45 days of multifamily residential units. The city doesn't actually have on the table any requisite proposals to amend the general plan or the zoning ordinance that those housing projects would conflict with, and that is required by the statute. The staff report relies on the Planning Commission's consideration within the next 2 weeks of design guidelines, but that is not incorporated within the statute, as well as a vague intent to consider changes to the development bonus structure sometime in the future. Note that what was discussed here this evening was that you might change the development bonus structure to add incentives to affordable housing. And I don't know how on earth housing projects could conflict with incentives that may be proposed in the future. So I don't see that the projects, findings could be made. Of course, as you're aware, in order to extend the moratorium beyond 45 days, you would need to find that multifamily housing poses a threat to human health or safety because it would conflict with numerical, objective, written health or safety standards. And there was no less intrusive way of addressing that health or safety threat. It's a tall order precisely because the legislature knows that Californians desperately need housing.
Anna, that's your time.
Not to adopt the moratorium. Thank you.
All right. John Bowders.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. John Bowders, resident of Emeryville, the Policy Director at Housing California. We're the state's leading advocacy organization on affordable housing. I do need to share with you that in consultation, we're an umbrella organization for regional affordable housing advocates and developers. And I do need to share with you that in consultation with them, we do have concerns with the moratorium. And those concerns are simply related to the perverse situation we're actually in. Impact fees will be diminished as a result of curtailing market rate rentals, or the development of market rate rentals. But when you look at why that is a problem for affordable developers, you kind of see the real bare bones of what this situation is about. Ever since we lost the set-aside with RDA, and although I know I don't particularly agree with the city attorney on his interpretation of the Palmer decision's application here, we are left with very few choices to create affordability. And it's interesting, there's myself and a smattering of other people here who are regularly here speaking to you about housing issues. And so it's nice to see so many people show up suddenly and talk about how they care about affordability. I find that rather amusing, actually. I wish they would be advocates on a regular basis for affordability in housing, and I wish that they would go to some of the other communities in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties and explain to them how creating 20,000 to 50,000 jobs and not approving a single development for the rental of housing creates a shifted burden to other communities. This is not simply a supply and demand problem. Anybody who tells you that is using a very narrow economic model to argue for the creation of housing. Supply does increase affordability, but it does not reach the people who are in the greatest need for a very long time. And to the comments that were made earlier by other people here, people coming into the Bay Area for jobs are not coming here to the Bay Area to work at McDonald's. They are coming here for high-paying jobs, and that does not eliminate the need that low-income people in this community have for affordable housing. We do appreciate the comments to incentivize. We believe you should apply the inclusionary zoning ordinance that you have on the books here, and we do appreciate greatly the efforts that are made by undertaking this conversation because it is long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Waterbury.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Alex Waterbury. I'm with Lennar Multifamily Communities, and I'm part of the Sherwin-Williams development venture. I'll be joined by Bruce and Joe. I believe will be coming up in a bit to speak. I wanted mainly to introduce Lennar to you. I know we're new to the project, relatively speaking, in the last year. We're not new to Emeryville. Our development team collectively has built about 8 projects through the years on the construction and development side. And I mention that because each one of those projects, we learned something new about Emeryville, what works, what doesn't, and part of what attracted us to this opportunity was to take those lessons learned and apply it to this exciting opportunity. I couldn't help but mention that our lead project manager on this project, Kevin Ma, who is over here, 9-year resident of Emeryville, raised 2 young boys, understands family housing in Emeryville, appreciates those concerns. Myself, born and raised in the East Bay, spent a lot of time here, so I can appreciate that concern as well. Mainly want to talk about a little bit about Lennar. Probably know us as the 2nd largest home builder in the country, but what you may not realize is that our focus, our niche, relative to some of our peers, is entry-level, first-time home buyers. And by definition, that is usually affordable, and often those with young families, first-time buyers. That culture permeates both the rental and the for sale side. It's what drew us to this opportunity to look at building both rental and for sale. We've been known as a company for developing really innovative floor plans, multi-generational young families. All we ask is the opportunity to show you what we can do through the normal planning process. We encourage you not to vote for the 45 days. Let us get into this and get this project that's been 12 to 13 years in the making actually happen. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'll try my last effort again. Bruce Dorfman, Rob Arias, and Bill Reuter.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight. I just want to mention 3 quick points. Number one is on Tuesday night I was on a panel at a Spur event regarding affordability. One of your former planning directors was actually sitting just to my left, Claudia Capio, who's now currently the head of the HCD, as well as one of the largest nonprofit housing developers, being Linda Mandolini at Eden Housing. And there was an interesting discussion about, with the dissolution of redevelopment agency, just as you heard from Mr. Bowders earlier, there is a lack of funding for new housing, new affordable housing projects. And it's through inclusionary or in lieu fees that nonprofit developers are making new projects work economically. The other interesting element of this is that there was a discussion about whether or not it's more efficient to have inclusionary housing or to give in lieu fees to nonprofit developers. And in the case of Eden, they thought they could, in cities such as Emeryville, they thought they could create twice the number of housing units through in lieu fees than the inclusionary housing ordinance would allow, just through other sources of funding that they can get. Number 2, with regard to our history with the Sherwin-Williams site, Joe Ernst and I were brought in by Sherwin-Williams in 2002 when they were first contemplating redevelopment of that site. At that time, it was an operating paint manufacturing facility. The neighbors had changed quite a bit from when it was first built, and consequently, the neighbors didn't like the noise of the manufacturing, they didn't like the impacts of the manufacturing, they didn't like the trucks idling outside of that facility. Sherwin-Williams said that that plant was no longer consistent, even though they had a use that, a historical use that would have allowed them to continue. They have subsequently, obviously, demolished that plant. They have remediated the site, but for the past 12 years now, we have been working on a plan, and we have been in front of this body, in front of the Planning Commission and study sessions 6 times. We've probably had hundreds of meetings with the community, with individuals as well as agencies and groups, and we've taken that input, continued to modify our plan. Obviously, we got a lot of input several weeks ago, and we're looking forward to responding to you as we incorporate those changes into our plan. And finally, I would just note that I understand each one of your objectives. I don't think you need a moratorium for that. I think study sessions would allow you to bounce ideas off the community to respond. Thank you.
Rob Arias, I write the Evil Eye Community News, and I'm also on the Park Avenue District Committee. I'm not here to preach about family-friendly housing. I have a different opinion about that. I really don't feel like you could just shoehorn in a few 3-bedroom units and families are just going to move in. We're surrounded by 1-bedroom units, but I feel like you have to do more of a cohesive development for that. But anyway, I'm not here to preach about that. I'm here to preach about for-sale, affordable units. I live down Park Avenue, the Emeryville warehouse lofts next to another development. They're called Icon, and they're owned by a corporation called Prometheus. Every year they raise the rents on those poor renters $300 a year. And every year on Park Avenue, I see it log jammed with moving vans. They're moving out. They don't want to move, but they can't afford it anymore. That's right. Corporations do not care about people. They don't care about individuals. It's unfortunate, but it seems to be the case. So I'm here to advocate to you. Let me cite off a few more stats here. Emeryville, 66% renters, and there's a 75% turnover in residents every 8 years. We just can't keep a continuity of people here because they can't afford it. So unfortunately, if this is what it's come to in order to get developers to listen to us, then I guess that's got to be. It could have been solved a long time ago if they would have, decided to build more for-sale affordable units, but they don't want to do it. They say it doesn't pencil out. They say we can't find the funding. I'm not buying it. So if this is what it takes in order to get them to listen, then this is how it's got to be, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Reuter, Joshua Simon, welcome back, Joshua. Ruth Emwood, who I assume is Ruth Major, and Matt Maloon. And I do not have any other cards after that, so turn them in if you must speak.
Good evening, Mayor Atkins, city councilors, and others. I'm a longtime resident of Emeryville, 35 years. I'm resident member and chair of the Finance Advisory Committee of the city, serve on the Economic Development Advisory Committee for the city. Care a lot about this city, and I care a lot about development in the city. I'd like to say this. Councilperson Jack Asher, thanks very much for throwing that bomb into the room and stirring this discussion. We badly needed it. Groups like Residents United for a Livable Emeryville, which I'm a member of, have been trying for years to get attention focused on the development of affordable, family-friendly housing and a good housing supply for all the people who live and work in Emeryville. And we care very much about the quality of the city, what kind of a city we live in. Is it vibrant? Is it a good city to live in? Does it have a good network of neighborhood small shops and businesses to support it? However you decide on the moratorium, whether it's a crude weapon or whether it's a usable slowdown so we can think a little more about where we're going, thanks again, Councilperson Asher, for stirring up this kind of stimulating discussion.
Joshua.
Good evening. I'm delighted to that you're having this conversation. As a long-time affordable housing advocate and someone who advocates for family-friendly housing, I think the outpouring of conversation is important. The policies this council over the last year, 2 years, has put into place in terms of inclusionary, in terms of development fees, are a model for the community. I am concerned about using the moratorium tool. I think that there's a number of other ways to get where you want to go. The work that I do, my day job, I do have a day job, is affordable housing development. And as a developer, it does send a chilling message that organization can invest tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars on pre-development and preparation, get to the finish line, and then be frozen without any warning. So I do think that there are other ways to get where you want to go. I would encourage this to be the beginning of a conversation to find ways to implement the truly progressive policies that you've had. It is critical to find ways that families can continue to live. It's critical for the economic development of our area and of Emeryville in particular for there to be workforce housing. I just lost a terrific employee who said, Josh, I'd love to stay and work for Balsey. I'd love to continue doing this work, but my wife and I just had a baby. We just can't afford to be in the Bay Area. We have to move to Sacramento. We know from 10 years ago that people will soon be commuting from Tracy, from Stockton to get to the jobs here, and eventually the businesses will move closer to their workforce. We either find a way to develop workforce housing, and that includes affordable rental housing that with long-term rental restrictions that allow the workforce to be able to stay. So I would encourage you to build on the policies you've put in place, to work with the development community, to find ways to put those in place, and to use tonight's excellent conversation to drive that policy and to drive that conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ruth.
Evening, everyone. First of all, the moratorium is 45 days, not 45 years. And so it's quite strange to hear some of the comments. I think we do need to pause and think about our housing and what's going on. It is a chance, and it's the last chance really, because there isn't much land left. So we do need to stop and think about what we're doing. I wanted to give you an example of rents. In July 2009, a two-bedroom, 1,200 square foot rental home was going for $1,700. In 2014, that same apartment was going for $4,250. The people who lived there moved to Oregon. They just couldn't afford to be here anymore. Listening to the discussion earlier on, welfare. What do we mean by welfare? Welfare, it's the minimal level of well-being and social support, social, economics, psychological, and spiritual. And what's social support? Social support is the support of a social network. So I think when we look at those two pieces and think about what you want to do with the moratorium, I think that ties together. Families also need housing. Yes, we have a lot of young people here worried about where they're going to live and how they're going to afford to live. But we also have families who need housing and haven't had housing opportunities for a very, very long time. So 45 days will allow us time for at least the beginnings of a comprehensive plan. And I think now that we've got much larger audience interested in housing, maybe we can get a lot more done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Matt Malone. And then Jay Hun Trembach.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Location, location, location. The city of Emeryville is blessed and cursed by a prime location for development in the East Bay. So I think it's proper for this council to take a step back and look at what this development is going to look like. What do you actually want to see on a long-term perspective? There's two items on the moratorium that I'd like to speak to from a construction standpoint. When these developments are under construction, they will have hundreds, and then depending on the construction schedule, possibly thousands of construction workers on these projects. Oftentimes we see where these workers come from out of the area, Sacramento, Modesto, a lot of what you've been hearing tonight. I would suggest that these projects should also include a strong local hire component, so that the construction workers that work on these jobs come from this local area. The second thing is affordability. If workers on these projects are paid substandard wages, this whole conversation about affordability, to rent, much less to buy, just goes out the window. So again, I would suggest some sort of attachment to it that would include area standard wages for the people that actually work on these construction projects, so that they might actually have a hope of living in this area and perhaps even purchasing in this area. And again, the wages that they earn on these jobs get recycled back into this local economy. That's about it. Thank you.
Sorry if I messed up your name.
Oh, it's you got it pretty good.
All right.
Yeah, so I would be in favor of the housing moratorium if I owned a house, because I think it would make my property value go up. Be easier to rent out a room or something for more money, because it'd be less housing. But I rent, so I think this will just make my rent higher. I think it's going to disrupt projects that are in progress right now and result in less housing in Emeryville and the greater Bay Area. So, thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're closing public comment, and now we have it. You didn't turn it in, Brian.
Turning it in right now.
Here we go. Oh, boy.
Oh my God, he's the last speaker. Okay, well, a couple of really good points were made tonight. First by Mr. Bowders, who expressed sort of some surprise at the number of developers speaking before you here tonight that are very concerned with providing Emeryville affordable housing. So I'd like to thank Mr. Bowders for that comment and join on to that. Also, we've heard tonight from a plethora, in fact, just about every developer is very concerned also with providing family-friendly housing. And I am so happy that the developers interested in developing in Emeryville are now on board. And so they haven't been up till now, but starting now, they're going to do it, they promise. And if you believe that, you probably shouldn't be on the city council. So we heard a lot of stuff. We heard they're all concerned about family-friendly housing. They've got to get it. And yet we also heard that it's illegal to try to get family-friendly housing. Families, we now find out, are one person. So if a one-person household is a family household, family-friendly household, then what are we talking about? We've got to stop talking about family-friendly households or housing, because every house that we build, rent for rent or for purchase, is by definition family-friendly, because a person's going to live in it, unless it's for a dog, I presume. So that is pretty absurd, but yet we learned that tonight. The other point that a citizen made was that if we pass this moratorium, this 45-day moratorium, this will, quote, this person said this, hurt Emeryville's reputation. I think it would hurt our reputation. What is our reputation? our reputation is that we don't provide housing, affordable and family-friendly housing, and we're not providing the kind of city that the residents want. And how do we know that? Well, we listen to the residents. So we heard tonight from huge number of out of developers and lawyers, some out-of-towners, that they all say no to this 45-day moratorium, and yet the Emeryville residents say yes. So what do you do? I say that we proceed with the moratorium. It's 45 days. It's a chance to rethink what we're doing here. Lastly, I wanted to say that Ms. Shimko, the attorney, said that it's not legal to do a moratorium. And yet our city attorney, Mr. Biddle, says that it is legal. So I guess we're in a quandary here. I say it is legal, and I say that the five of you are here and you're allowed to make decisions like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. So we come to the point where happy hour starts downstairs. But no, seriously, it's time now for council discussion. It's nice to see your interest in this 1.2 square mile city and in this greater metropolitan area. So I will just run through the dais and people can give their comments.
Ruth, could I ask a few questions of Mike Biddle before we start the discussion?
Absolutely. If anybody has any questions to clarify, yes.
Yeah, I think this whole issue of using the term family-friendly housing, would you go over that again, Michael, and let us understand whether using that term puts us in any kind of jeopardy as we move forward with any kind of decision that we make? Start with what the feds did. Briefly.
Well, the Fair Housing Act defines family to include an individual, as Mr. Donahue just recalled there. So when you use that term family, that under federal housing law, you are necessarily including one person household all the way up to whatever the household
So we
might
can
include.
use that term as long as we don't say it has to be a man and a wife and 2 kids. It just
Yeah,
has
you
to
can
be
never say
family.
that. And
We can't
the only,
define. No, this is a serious thing because
No, I know
they
it
could
is.
come back and really hit us on this.
No, and all the point that I was trying to get at is that in terms of what the city has been talking about in the context of what it means when it says the term family-friendly design. I think what you have always been talking about is not necessarily just individuals, but you're looking to try to create designs that appeal to larger households, and the hope is that those larger households would have children. So you're trying to encourage the design of those households that are conducive to larger households. You can't say, hey, they got to have children in them. You can't ever do that. But to the extent you are trying to influence the design of units that are conducive to larger households, I think you can do that.
Well, we just got to keep our eye on that. The other question that I have, and it came up several times from people in the audience, is this focus on rental housing versus for sale housing. Can you tell us all exactly what kind of power does a municipality have to say to a property owner, you will build for sale housing? You cannot build rental housing.
I don't think you have any authority to do that.
You want to say that again?
I do not believe that the city has any authority to do that.
So the only way we could get at trying to tip the balance to for sale housing is to offer a carrot. We don't have a stick.
Correct.
Is that the idea?
That would be the idea.
All right. That's all I have.
Any other questions for the city attorney? I have a question. To find findings of a current and immediate threat to public health, safety, or welfare, you've instructed us that we need to find a very specific and adverse impact, and that there's no other alternative to mitigate or avoid the specific and adverse impact. How do you quantify hitting the pause button for 45 days in terms of having a quantifiable impact?
You are taking the next step. You're reading the findings that are required if you're going to extend it.
Oh,
that's the extension.
So
oops. Okay. Well, so we don't have to find that there's a current immediate threat to public health, welfare, and safety?
No, you do. But the issue relative to an extension speaks to an additional set of findings that are only based on threats to public health or safety. Welfare is not an element of those findings, and there are, as I indicated, specific findings related to a specific adverse impact that you would have to find to the extent you were looking to extend the moratorium, after its initial adoption. That said, you still do, for purposes of trying, to the extent it was looking to adopt the interim ordinance initially, there is a requirement to make a finding of a current and immediate impact, or a current immediate threat to the public health, safety, or welfare.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Council Member Asher's been the force behind this. I'll give you the opportunity to speak first.
Yeah. Thank you. First, I want to say that the idea that we in Emeryville don't want to build is a misunderstanding. Let's say that in a generous fashion, a misunderstanding of our recent history and also what the council is doing up here. In the last 10 years, we've added an additional 56% to our housing stock here in the city. So the idea that we are bad actors within the region simply isn't true. Also, I want projects to be built. I want to draw more people toward the resources that we have in our city, and part of that has to do with drawing families with children, or at least allowing them to stay. Right now, the kind of housing that we build, if you could start out here in a studio, right? But once you have a child, there are very few options in Emeryville because it's just about 5% of our housing stock that's 3 bedrooms. If you have 2 children, good luck, right? 3 bedrooms, they're rare as hen's teeth. Good luck finding one. And we need more of these things. Families with children are a protected class under the Fair Housing Act as well, and I don't understand why we would want to build a city that excludes them. Moreover, I keep hearing about a housing crisis, but we have an affordability crisis. And this is what we're trying to address in Emeryville. Several people have cited our housing element, chapter and verse, to me, and I want to point out a section there on overpayment. I'll read from the housing element here. A household is considered to be overpaying for housing and is cost burdened if it spends 30 to 50% of its gross income on housing, including a rent or mortgage payment and utility cost. A household is considered to be severely cost burdened if it spends greater than 50% of its gross income on housing costs. Overpayment for housing can result in, and these sound a little bit like health concerns and safety concerns to me, can result in insufficient income available for other basic needs and services, including food, childcare, and medical attention. As shown in Table 224, nearly half of Emeryville households were overpaying for housing as of 2010. Approximately 22% were cost-burdened, and another 28% were severely cost-burdened. Overpayment was problematic for both renter and owner households. However, severe overpayment was particularly problematic for renter households, and of course, that is the majority of our housing stock in the city. We don't have the ability to stabilize rent to the degree that we would like. And the best way to get affordability is to build affordable housing. And when I look at our general plan and when I look at the housing element, I think there is an emergency that while we may have adequate land, adequate sites in order to meet the goals of these documents, we don't have the adequate tools to ensure that it gets done. And I think that has to be done through policy, not through negotiation. We have people coming up and talking about making exceptions and negotiating. To me, I'd like to be clear, and I'd like things to be predictable. And I think that's what's fair going forward. And I also don't think that the city's future should be up for negotiation, and we should start getting the tools that we need to get more affordability and to get a better unit mix in town. We simply don't have these right now.
Anybody else would like to speak? Scott?
I heard some comments about the quality of life, and that matters to me. I think having been recently elected and talked to a lot of voters, that matters to voters. And I think that having affordability as a part of our housing going forward, the way we have in the past, is important for the quality of life of our city going forward. And without the redevelopment law that we had, we have to do something a little different. And I think the 45-day moratorium would be a good step for us to consider how we're going to do this going forward. And I think that it's not true to say this is going to result in less housing for Emeryville. I don't believe that at all. I believe that we're going to have plenty of new housing going forward. But we have to be on the same page in order for that to happen. Without this, we could be just scrapping and fighting over each individual development, and in the long run, it would hurt Emeryville more than just getting it straight right now. So I think that's what we have to do going forward. And I want to say to everyone here that I am a builder by nature. I love building new things. I think we can build new things in our city that really are great, and I look forward to doing that. So let's move forward with this moratorium.
I wanted to thank everybody for coming out to speak tonight. We heard a lot of good ideas, and a couple of things struck me. One thing is I keep thinking back on something that Councilmember Donahue said at the last meeting, which is that it would be doing something of a service to the developers to give them a clear roadmap of what the city's looking for. And that roadmap would speak to what Mr. Carver said this evening. We need to ask ourselves, are our policies finally tuned enough to get our needs met as a city? So certainly we've put a lot of work into our general plan, and while it's meant to be a living document, it's meant to be amended, it's meant to be worked on, are we getting what we need out of that general plan and out of our recent housing element, which was so much work was put into? Are we getting those things that we're asking for? And is pausing for 45 days too much to ask? And I don't think it is. I do I don't take this idea lightly. I didn't know where I was going to land until I sat down and listened to all of you, and I appreciate all of your time and your thoughts. And I think that the idea that we're trying to stop development in Emeryville is ludicrous. As Jack stated, we have increased our rental housing by a huge amount, and our population by a huge amount in the last 20 years. As the members of council who've been here know. So I think if the idea of a moratorium was to send a message, that message has been received loud and clear by our community and by the development community. And I think if the 45 days is needed to further solidify that message, regardless of what happens in those days, I think
after everybody.
There is a net positive.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I want to thank Jack for bringing this forward, and thank everybody, as Diane did, for coming forward tonight. A very, very interesting discussion and brought out a lot of facets that we have to consider. I have to tell you that I am against this moratorium, and I want to give you the reasons why. First off, I am very, very uncomfortable with the process that took place here. That we have a lot of interested people here, but we have left out a lot of people because we went strictly by the law, only had 2 days notice, and only got the staff report yesterday. And we completely bypassed our usual process, which is to go out to the committees, like the Housing Committee, the Planning Commission. They are left out of the loop here. We didn't ask for their input on this. These are people that have dedicated hours and hours and hours to the city of Emeryville, and I think we've done a disservice to these volunteers on these committees, to say nothing of the people who are not quote, quote, council watchers, who have no idea that this meeting is taking place. So I'm uncomfortable with the process, and I think if you begin badly, you're probably going to end badly. The timing is an insult. A Friday night before a 3-day weekend. It's also a Sabbath night, I believe. It just seems to me that we have not really considered the wider population that doesn't have a direct interest in this. And then I want to go on to the ordinance. And this is a little surprising for me because I have a very high regard for our legal department. We have a wonderful staff. They do a great job. This ordinance, this piece of paper here is probably one of the worst things that I have ever looked at. Because when I look at the what is called the findings, I looked at those findings over and over again, trying to find a clear and present danger to the public health, to the public safety, or to the public welfare in this city. And what I saw was essentially a state fair snow, what do they call those, sugar cones, just absolutely puff. It simply did not, there's no foundation there to make a decision that we should have an urgency ordinance. So I'm very unhappy with that. I hate to say that because we have a good legal department. They were working at the direction of the majority of the council. And then I want to go on to the purpose of 45 days. It came out in the discussion that no way in 45 days are these issues going to be resolved. And at the end of 45 days, we're going to have to jump not a 3-foot barrier, but a 50-foot barrier. And we don't even have the 3-foot barrier foundation here. So 45 days would be it. What happens to this city in 45 days? you have sent a message to the development community. And you have also sent a message, which we certainly got back from the Department of Housing in Sacramento, that we almost sent a fraudulent document up there on they recently approved our housing element of the general plan, and we turn around and slam them with a moratorium. The implications of that, if the state housing decides they don't like Emeryville pulling a trick like this on them, is that we are cut off from a flow of funds, of many grant funds, et cetera. That's a real possibility when I look at the flimsiness of the findings. So that's something to consider. We have a purpose here that we want to do all good things and improve the city. We are putting this city at risk. We are putting the people who live and work in this city at risk because we're so anxious to do good, to, get affordability, to have family-friendly housing, that we are not looking at the outcomes or what will be happening, and we have never even discussed, to my knowledge, the alternatives. A few of the people in the audience have come forward and mentioned the fact that we have ongoing dialogues. We have an outstanding planning commission and housing committee, which we've excluded from this whole discussion. And so when we say, or even lack to say, that there's no alternative to this, that is absolutely not accurate. We are putting this city at risk with this moratorium. And I would urge, I know, listen, I have a high regard for every member of this council. I've supported every member of this council in their campaigns. I believe you have really honest intentions toward this city, but I don't think you have looked at the outcomes of what could be happening here for 45 days of nothing. That's a no vote, guys.
I'm going to speak that I know Councilmember Asher has more to say. On page 6 of 12 of the staff report, it reads, the urgency interim ordinance and required findings. The government code allows a legislative body to adopt as an urgency measure an interim ordinance prohibiting any uses that may be in conflict with a contemplated general plan, specific plan, or zoning proposal that the legislative body, planning commission, or the planning department is considering or studying or intends to study within a reasonable time. And the projects that are currently in the pipeline have gone through all of the city processes. And so I don't see the direct contradiction to anything that's in the pipeline in terms of what our processes allow. I am very glad we know how to pull a crowd together on a Friday night to talk about what really is a housing crisis in many respects. You've heard from the council. All of us share a concern about affordability. All of us share a concern about a diversity of unit mixes that actually could support the raising of children in this city. You've heard about being able to create ties and put down roots in the town. And in fact, one of the copious emails and letters that we got prior to this talked about an observation from someone who said in his building, a couple moves in, they have a baby, they move out so they can raise their kid, and then they rent out their unit. So even in our classic kind of single family or smaller density neighborhood of the Triangle, that's 80%. By the 2010 census, 80% of the Triangle was renter occupied. It was not owner occupied. We have a problem that I wonder how much we can fix through our policies. We've put out what we've wanted, and yet if you look at the housing RENA numbers over the last 3 cycles of the housing element, we're meeting fewer and fewer of our low-income and very low-income requirements under RENA. We're doing okay with the moderate level of income level, and we're oversubscribed at the market rate units. So to sit and negotiate with every single developer of, oh, can you squeeze another 3-bedroom in? Can you squeeze another 4-bedroom in? Does not really, that's not a fix. And so the question that I have for my colleague here is, what would 45 days do if we have policies in the housing element that say that what we want. We're not getting there. We're failing in terms of what is being built. So how does 45 days help us get to where we want?
Well, it doesn't help us to do nothing at this point and continue steady state. We know what we've been getting with wishes and handshakes and negotiations. And for me, I want staff to work quickly. I do not want a moratorium for many months, for a year. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a few months. I want them to develop policy tools around zoning, right? And some of the other things that we've discussed here. And they need the time to work on it. I don't know how much they can complete in 45 days, but my direction would be for us to pass the moratorium and for them to work quickly. There's a very narrow question in front of us, and if what we're trying to do is determine whether or not we're going to hit the pause button right now by considering if we're going to need a year and 5 months is the wrong question. I think we need to just stick to the narrow question with 45 days and ask staff to start working on this. If they cannot, then if they cannot finish everything that they need, maybe they will finish something in that amount of time. And I think that we do need to hit the pause button.
May I add something on this topic, Ruth? I was talking to the city attorney's office before the meeting began, and my understanding is that in 2011, Pasadena was considering a specific plan for their downtown, and they did exactly what we're doing. They hit the pause button, and in those 45 days, they completed their specific plan, and they got what they wanted in terms of, I'm sorry, is there a correction I hear from the audience? Because if you have a correction, I'd love for you to come up to the microphone and correct me there, so it's on the record.
It doesn't matter who can visualize it. We're directing staff to do the work.
Yeah, I just wanted to give Ruth some context as to what's happened in 45 days in one specific instance. And I'm sorry, if you have a comment, please come up to the podium. We'd love to, not you. There's someone behind you who's mouthing something.
Well, no,
okay, so if there's no comment, I wanted to give you a little context and something that has happened in 45 days, just to answer a question. So,
what was the specific plan that Pasadena created in 45 days?
And there was something on the table. It wasn't something that they created in 45 days, but Michael might be able to give us some context on this.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Michael Guina, Assistant City Attorney. So in your staff report, we provided some background information about moratoria that were adopted by other cities. One of the examples that we provided was the city of Pasadena, and the city had adopted a moratorium on development of residential and multi and mixed-use projects in their central district. The moratorium was for 45 days, and they didn't extend it. And during that time period, they had adopted their specific plan. The reason that they enacted the moratorium was because they were at the time they were in the process of studying and developing their specific plan. So at the time of the adoption of the moratorium, they had an actual live project in terms of developing and studying their specific plan, so that by the time, and they so as a result, they didn't want any new development coming in while their specific plan was under consideration. They were able to complete the study and the adoption of their specific plan within the 45-day period.
Thank you for that clarification. Would you, as long as you're up here, could you talk about other situations where moratoria affected some desired outcome?
Well, sure. So the only, I was able to do some very quick research this afternoon about the examples that we had provided you in the staff report about the other cities that I
Yeah, I'd like them verbally on the record. So.
Sure. So the only other, so Pasadena I mentioned, the only other city that I was able to quickly find information on was regarding the city of San Mateo. So as I mentioned in the staff report, they adopted an ordinance restricting or prohibiting the issuance of any new development in the city. This was following the Palmer decision, and the city was looking for tools essentially to understand how to react to the inability to require affordable rental housing after the Palmer decision. The city decided that they were going to enact a moratorium for 45 days, which they later extended to once to the 10 months and 15-day period during that study. And during that time, they determined what they were going to need was an amendment to their general plan. The city of San Mateo is a charter city, and their charter says that in order to make an amendment to their general plan, they needed to bring a measure to the voters for approval, which they did. This was in 2011. For the 2011 ballot, they brought forward a measure asking the voters for that amendment to the general plan, which would have imposed a housing impact fee. The voters rejected that measure, and that was the end of their moratorium.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the council?
Hi. Excuse me. You
no,
invited
I didn't call on the public.
Actually, Ms. Martinez did invite comment.
Okay, so just as a matter of clarification, you missed that opportunity when she invited you up, and I have.
I actually raised my hand at that time, and another speaker. I came up after that speaker.
I don't think it was you I was talking to.
You didn't.
No, I'm sorry. There was a woman behind Chris.
Comment?
Oh, there was a woman behind Chris Owens who was mouthing something that
I'm sorry.
took it
You
to me.
invited comment. I don't think you're allowed to specify if it's to one participant or another.
So actually, only the presiding officer for the meeting can open the floor for people. So I'm gonna ask that you hold your comment. I might open the floor again after we have some more discussion before a vote.
Yeah. One more thing. So in 45 days, I'm not staff, but what I would like to see them do is put incentives for larger households in place and rework the bonus structure. I mean, these are things that we've talked about, and to find ways to reward affordability, and also I want to understand what other tools we have, because the negotiating and as you said, right, the housing that we're getting built right now, it's actually not fulfilling the plans that we have in place. When are we gonna play catch up, and when is the right time for this emergency, right? I keep hearing that this was not a good time to have this emergency, but we've been having this emergency for a long while now, especially around the larger unit mix. And I just don't think that negotiation is going to get us there. We need to be more even-handed and much more clear.
Okay, Scott.
I had a question for Mr. Biddle about the one marketplace project you mentioned that has 190 units that you thought was quite far along and you wanted some council input on. Would you describe further?
No, that project has been, that project is actually, I believe it got its occupancy permit today.
Okay.
So that one's, we're not talking about that, but we were, what we were asking for is some direction on council as to whether the council would like to sort of exclude the marketplace project, which has, correct me if I can recall this incorrectly, I believe there are 5 FDPs that are coming. They're shaking their head. Yes, there's one for a park. There's one for a grocery store with the townhouses wrapped around it. There's one for housing where the UA Theater is currently. There's another one for housing by the pedestrian bridge, and then there's a realignment of the street, and the parcel that would butt up against the railroad tracks would be primarily parking and retail. So again, the request was, to the extent the council is looking to adopt this, would you consider making an exception for that project?
Did you?
I feel that that it's worth something. The amount of affordability still concerns me going forward about that, and they sound like they are pretty far along on everything else that we would like. I mean, the amount of 2 and 3 bedrooms for their units were good, so it just seems like we're really close. And I just can't imagine that this 45 days is going to really interrupt their flow of approvals that much, if at all. I mean, if they're as close as they seem to describe it with the number of unit mix.
Okay. Any other council members?
Yeah, I have a question for Michael. With the absence of redevelopment funds, clarify for me just who's going to pick up the tab for the affordability of certain units. Where will that money come from?
Which affordable units are you speaking to?
Well, we've heard a lot of talk about the council wants affordable units, which is all very well and good, and we all want affordable units, but who's going to pick up the tab?
Well, so currently we do have a affordable housing fee in place. It's, my recollection, it's $20,000 per unit. So to the extent these projects go forward, and they do not provide any affordable units in their project, then they would pay the fee. If they propose to do an ownership project, then in that case we would be able to require the provision of affordable units as part of that approval process. There would be a affordable housing covenant, and you would actually get the actual units as part of the ownership project. So that would, obviously the cost associated with that is borne by the developer. They would not pay a affordable housing fee at that point.
So in the spirit of full public engagement, I'll open public comment one more time. Anybody who wishes to speak, just line up. I don't have a speaker card. I can't call your name. Just come on up. Come on up.
Hi, I simply wanted to state that if Pasadena was working on a specific plan, how many months or years had they been working on that before that 45 days allowed them to complete it? And in comparison, how long has this community and the board been working on the plan for Emeryville before pulling this trigger? Or if one has not been started, how can it possibly be completed in 45 days? Thank you.
I'm Chris Owens, and I was not planning on doing this, but I want to just say a few things. I was on the Planning Commission here for 20 years, and I know there is nothing that gets done in 45 days, because we have a process. We have to schedule public hearings, we have to go through the various committees, and we have to have everybody's input. But I think I sort of kind of agree with you, Jack, as far as pausing. because I do believe we are getting too many apartment buildings for rent, because that's all the market wants right now. That's all that's going on out there. And so therefore, we always get what the market calls for, not what we want. I know there are probably some people in the audience right now who are shocked because I'm saying this.
Well, yeah, Chris, you do have a reputation.
I am older now, and I am wiser now. Okay? What I want to say is, that's good, let's do that. But let's not stop everything that's in process. I, for instance, think the marketplace across the street, I was working on that one, the 20 years. I was on the Planning Commission, working on the PUD, and the different things we're going through, like doing commercial and doing different things. I think that project's going to be wonderful, with the grocery store, the extension of the park, and the housing wrapped around the store. And I think that is one you should let go forward. You should sort of compromise. Those that are at a certain point, you should let go, and then put your stop button, your pause button beyond that. And I'm probably going to get killed on my way home, but you know, because I do understand, you know, and I do, and we do want housing for sale. But I was also in the title business for 40 years. Nothing ever happened that the market didn't generate. It is very difficult for cities to try to get what they want, you know? So try to make a compromise there. Okay?
Hello. I just wanted to be clear. I believe I heard some discussion of a proposal to exempt.
Can you move the mic closer?
Hard to hear you.
A proposal to exempt some projects, and I think you mentioned the public market. That our Nady site is further along and further on the agenda. So I would presume if that proponent did go forward, we would be exempt as well. And we're happy to pay those fees. As Councilmember Davis said, the fees of $20,000 a door, which ends up on our project being over $4 million, and that goes to housing. And as a colleague, Mr. Dorfman said, that has the effect of 2 times as opposed to having them on site. And the affordable conversation is certainly part of our DNA. We came from affordable housing at Anton Development. We do all kinds of 80-20 deals, and it's part of our DNA. So I just want to say that. Thank you.
Hi. I've heard a lot said here today about affordable housing, but we seem to be defining affordable housing as a housing that's affordable if you win a lottery to get it. To really, in my opinion, to be like affordable housing is if I'm looking for an apartment, I can find something that I can afford. I recently moved to the Bay Area like less than a year ago, and I actually live in Emeryville now, and it's great. But there's literally nothing that I could find that I would consider affordable, and that's not because we haven't built enough housing or we need to like pause and like take a step back. It's not affordable because there's too many people with like 2 well-paying jobs, which is awesome, but all competing for not enough housing.
Evening again. Just a couple of quick points. First, I want to say, as policymakers, you know, you have difficult choices, so I appreciate, and I don't want to second guess the difficult choices you have to make. I do want to make sure that you're aware of some of the impacts of the decision. First of all, as a developer, I have to say 45 days is not a 45-day pause. You have all sorts of contracts with all sorts of consultants. They put the work aside, so it's going to be more than a 45-day pause. We had this when we developed Swan's Market. The city asked us to put Swan's Market on pause. It set us back a year before we could get everything back lined up again. And it's a year and a time when we are in the fastest growing market in my lifetime. It's just been amazing to see how rents have gone up. But I do think it's the right conversation, and it's critically important. I do want to also make sure that the affordable housing that you have approved doesn't get accidentally swept into this moratorium, so.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
Just to double check, you did a terrific job with Star Intersection. My heart was broken when we didn't get the contract, but I am thankful for the groups that are doing it. So just a couple of other considerations. Tough decision, important conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I do think it's important that the city and the residents of Emeryville reap some of the benefits of all the development that you've been seeing for the last 15 to 20 years. I'd like to add a little perspective to this whole idea of affordable housing. One thing that makes housing more affordable is when people make a decent income, okay? So it's not always you have to drive the price down. How about raising people's living standard?
Come next.
That's Tuesday.
Tuesday's meeting.
Kind of
That's
date
Tuesday, yeah.
Just a thought I'd like to add. Thank you.
I want to add one thing. I don't think anyone said it to you, Councilmember Asher, but it is very hard to be vilified and questioned your intentions and your integrity well, you deal with it all the time. Yes, we both do sometimes. But, I appreciate, again, how much it takes to stand up and have this conversation. And although I can't agree on the proposed process for some of the reasons I gave, and I want to take credit for getting Chris Owens to say what she said somehow, but I suppose it's the Housing Committee. I did want to propose an alternative to what's been proposed. What the things that are being slated to be dealt with that may or may not be able to be dealt with in 45 days can and should be done without a question. And I do believe that setting a timetable should be a priority for this council to deal with those things. That you can do that and you still have leverage over the current projects that are in process. And I know that the reason Councilmember Asher has requested this is because it will create a lot more predictability and it will stabilize what we expect from people coming into the city to do business as development. But I think you've sent a shot out across the bow today, hopefully. I heard developers who I've sat in every planning commission meeting about these projects who are told affordability and come back without it. So shame on them. But I do think you hold the final decision to approve a lot of the things they ask for. And so you can choose to deny these projects if they don't listen to what's been said today and they don't deliver on the things that come out. And you should deny them because everything that they question about your integrity here coming into this meeting should be questioned going forward as to their statements today, the veracity of what they claim they're going to do. So contemplate doing the things that you want to do for sure. I would do them, but consider holding their feet to the fire and making sure that when we put these new ideas in place for everyone going forward, we've established predictability, but don't let anyone in this room off the hook perhaps instead.
So I just wanted to say that I could have stayed home tonight and watched television or something like that, but this is way better. What I've seen here is way better than anything you could see on TV. So it's been very entertaining. I've really enjoyed myself. It's been, and there have been some delicious comments made here that I intend on chewing over. But if you think about just the absurdity, really, if you look at the overview, the aggregate of what's been said here by all these developers that are in this audience here, what they're saying is that, well, essentially what they're saying is, well, we haven't really done what the city wants up till now. But from now on, it's going to happen. And it's without any evidence about how that could happen, other than just their assurances here tonight. It sort of reminds me of in Washington, we've watched over the last couple of generations how the Republican Party has adopted this trickle-down idea. And so the middle class is going to be helped by tax cuts to the wealthy, because their wealth will trickle down. Well, by the year 2015 now suddenly they've dropped that. Now they are all for the middle class, and now they've abandoned the trickle down, and yet their prescription is precisely the same. It's tax cuts for the wealthy, and so it's a lot of talk and assurances that things are changed, but yet the prescription is not changed. So that's what I'm hearing here tonight from these developers, and so I put it to you, and it shouldn't be surprising. Any rational person should clearly see this, that they're greedy, and they want to maximize their profits. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not illegal for them to come up here and lie to us. It's not illegal. But I think that's what's going on. I think they're just telling us what we want to hear. And I think we should use the tools that we have, that the law permits us to use, to craft the kind of town that we want to live in. And that's not very radical, really, if you think about it. But thank you very much.
All right, so now it comes, sorry.
First, I wanted to address the last gentleman who says that we won't keep our word and all that. Anton Development Company has built actually 30 plus affordable housing projects throughout the state of California and provided about 5,000 very low income units throughout California. So we definitely understand affordable housing. You made a big step towards solving your affordable housing problem when you implemented the $20,000 per door in lieu fee. And in order to get that money, you need to let all these projects go through. I think 11 million from Avalon Bay, 4 million from us. I'm guessing Thompson Dorfman is probably 12, 13, 14 million. That's almost $30 million. Affordable housing, redevelopment agencies are gone. I know a few years ago, the city of San Jose estimated it takes about $110,000 per unit of city subsidy to get an affordable housing project off the ground. So $30 million, let's say inflation, you're in the Bay Area, 150, probably 160, 180 units. Very low income units could be created in the city of Emeryville if you collect these impact fees from these developers.
Thank you. So we're at this point now where council needs to come down with its decision, and I, for one, have appreciated all of you coming out on a Friday night. I've appreciated the tenor of the discourse that's taken place tonight. We can handle difficult issues with civility and respect, and ultimately can come out stronger no matter what the decision is. So thank you for hanging in there with us while we discuss this. I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we adopt the 45-day moratorium.
I second that motion.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Asher.
Aye.
Councilmember Donahue.
Aye.
Councilmember Martinez.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Davis.
No.
Mayor Atkin.
So I'm going to vote against this, and needs a 4/5 vote. And the reason is not for the goals that are stated. I just think this is the wrong way to go about doing it. And with that, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you for your time.